The 7 riddles puzzles that will boost your brain power. Test your imagination and brain skills with this amazing brain teasers. Are you ready? All you need is your logic skills and critical thinking. Get ready. Number 1.
Imagine an island where 100 people, all perfect logicians, are imprisoned by a mad dictator. There's no escape except for one strange rule. Any prisoner can approach the guards at night and ask to leave. If they have green eyes, they'll be released. If not, they'll be tossed into the volcano. As it happens, all 100 prisoners have green eyes, but they've lived there since birth, and the dictator has ensured they can't learn their own eye color. There are no reflective surfaces. All water is in opaque containers, and most importantly, they're not allowed to communicate among themselves, though they do see each other during each morning's head count. Nevertheless, they all know no one would ever risk trying to leave without absolute certainty of success. After much pressure from human rights groups, the dictator reluctantly agrees to let you visit the island and speak to the prisoners under the following conditions. You may only make one statement, and you cannot tell them any new information. What can you say to help free the prisoners without incurring the dictator's wrath? After thinking long and hard, you tell the crowd, "At least one of you has green eyes." The dictator is suspicious, but reassures himself that your statement couldn't have changed anything. You leave, and life on the island seems to go on as before. But on the 100th morning after your visit, all the prisoners are gone, each having asked to leave the previous.
3, 2, 1. Answer. Brain teaser number 1.
You tell the crowd, "At least one of you has green eyes." The dictator is suspicious, but reassures himself that your statement couldn't have changed anything. You leave, and life on the island seems to go on as before. But on the 100th morning after your visit, all the prisoners are gone, each having asked to leave the previous night. So how did you outsmart the dictator? It might help to realize that the amount of prisoners is arbitrary. Let's simplify things by imagining just 2, Adria and Bill. Each sees one person with green eyes, and for all they know, that could be the only one. For the first night, each stays put. But when they see each other still there in the morning, they gain new information. Adria realizes that if Bill had seen a non-green-eyed person next to him, he would have left the first night, after concluding the statement could only refer to himself. Bill simultaneously realizes the same thing about Adria. The fact that the other person waited tells each prisoner his or her own eyes must be green, and on the second morning, they're both gone. Now imagine a third prisoner. Adria, Bill, and Carl each see 2 green-eyed people, but aren't sure if each of the others is also seeing 2 green-eyed people, or just one. They wait out the first night as before, but the next morning they still can't be sure. Carl thinks, if I have non-green eyes, Adria and Bill were just watching each other, and will now both leave on the second night. But when he sees both of them the third morning, he realizes they must have been watching him too. Adria and Bill have each been going through the same process, and they all leave on the third night. Using this sort of inductive reasoning, we can see that the pattern will repeat no matter how many prisoners you add. The key is the concept of common knowledge, coined by philosopher David Lewis. The new information was not contained in your statement itself, but in telling it to everyone simultaneously. Now, besides knowing at least one of them has green eyes, each prisoner also knows that everyone else is keeping track of all the green-eyed people they can see, and that each of them also knows this, and so on. What any given prisoner doesn't know is whether they themselves are one of the green-eyed people the others are keeping track of, until as many nights have passed as the number of prisoners on the island. Of course, you could have spared the prisoners 98 days on the island by telling them, At least 99 of you have green eyes. But when mad dictators are involved, you're best off with a good head start.
2.
The city has just opened its one-of-a-kind Fabergé egg museum, with a single egg displayed on each floor of a 100-story building. And the world's most notorious jewel thief already has her eyes on the prize. Because security is tight and the eggs are so large, she'll only get the chance to steal one by dropping it out the window into her waiting truck and rappelling down before the police can arrive. All eggs are identical in weight and construction, but each floor's egg is more rare and valuable than the one below it. While the thief would naturally like to take the priceless egg at the top, she suspects it won't survive a 100-story drop. Being pragmatic, she decides to settle for the most expensive egg she can get. In the museum's gift shop, she finds 2 souvenir eggs, perfect replicas that are perfectly worthless. The plan is to test drop them to find the highest floor at which an egg will survive the fall without breaking. Of course, the experiment can only be repeated until both replica eggs are smashed. And throwing souvenirs out the window too many times is probably going to draw the guards' attention. What's the least number of tries it would take to guarantee that she finds the right floor?
3, 2, 1. Answer. Number 2.
Having trouble getting started on the solution, it might help to start with a simpler scenario. Imagine our thief only had one replica egg. She'd have a single option: to start by dropping it from the first floor and go up one by one until it breaks. Then she'd know that the floor below that is the one she needs to target for the real heist, but this could require as many as 100 tries. Having an additional replica egg gives the thief a better option. She can drop the first egg from different floors at larger intervals in order to narrow down the range where the critical floor can be found. And once the first breaks, she can use the second egg to explore that interval floor by floor. Large floor intervals don't work great. In the worst-case scenario, they require many tests with the second egg. Smaller intervals work much better. For example, if she starts by dropping the first egg from every 10th floor, once it breaks, she'll only have to test the 9 floors below. That means it'll take at most 19 tries to find the right floor. But can she do even better? After all, there's no reason every interval has to be the same size. Let's say there were only 10 floors. The thief could test this whole building with just 4 total throws by dropping the first egg at floors 4, 7, and 9. If it broke at floor 4, it would take up to 3 throws of the second egg to find the exact floor. If it broke at 7, it would take up to 2 throws with the second egg. And if it broke at floor 9, it would take just 1 more throw of the second egg. Intuitively, what we're trying to do here is divide the building into sections where no matter which floor is correct, it takes up to the same number of throws to find it. We want each interval to be 1 floor smaller than the last. This equation can help us solve for the first floor we need to start with in the 100-floor building. There are several ways to solve this equation, including trial and error. If we plug in 2 for n, that equation would look like this. If we plug in 3, we get this. So we can find the first n to pass 100 by adding more terms until we get to our answer, which is 14. And so our thief starts on the 14th floor, moving up to the 27th, the 39th, and so on, for a maximum of 14 drops. Like the old saying goes, you can't pull a heist without breaking a few eggs.
3.
You and 9 other individuals have been captured by super-intelligent alien overlords. The aliens think humans look quite tasty, but their civilization forbids eating highly logical and cooperative beings. Unfortunately, they're not sure whether you qualify, so they decide to give you all a test. Through its universal translator, the alien guarding you tells you the following. You will be placed in a single-file line, facing forward in size order, so that each of you can see everyone lined up ahead of you. You will not be able to look behind you or step out of line. Each of you will have either a black or a white hat on your head, assigned randomly, and I won't tell you how many of each color there are. When I say to begin, each of you must guess the color of your hat, starting with the person in the back and moving up the line. And don't even try saying words other than black or white, or signaling some other way, like intonation or volume. You'll all be eaten immediately. If at least 9 of you guess correctly, you'll all be spared.
You have 5 minutes to discuss and come up with a plan, and then I'll line you up, assign your hats, and we'll begin.
Can you think of a strategy guaranteed to save everyone?
3, 2, 1. Answer. Number 3.
The solution is to agree that whoever goes first will, for example, say black if he sees an odd number of black hats, and white if he sees an even number of black hats. Let's see how it would play out if the hats were distributed like this. The tallest captive sees 3 black hats in front of him, so he says black, telling everyone else he sees an odd number of black hats. He gets his own hat color wrong, but that's okay, since you're collectively allowed to have one wrong answer. Prisoner 2 also sees an odd number of black hats, so she knows hers is white and answers correctly. Prisoner 3 sees an even number of black hats, so he knows that his must be one of the black hats the first 2 prisoners saw. Prisoner 4 hears that and knows that she should be looking for an even number of black hats since one was behind her. But she only sees 1, so she deduces that her hat is also black. Prisoners 5 through 9 are each looking for an odd number of black hats, which they see, so they figure out that their hats are white. Now it all comes down to you at the front of the line. If the 9th prisoner saw an odd number of black hats, that can only mean one thing. You'll find that this strategy works for any possible arrangement of the hats. The first prisoner has a 50% chance of giving a wrong answer about his own hat, but the parity information he conveys allows everyone else to guess theirs with absolute certainty. Each begins by expecting to see an odd or even number of hats of the specified color. If what they count doesn't match, that means their own hat is that color. And every time this happens, the next person in line will switch the parity they expect to see. So that's it, you're free to go. It looks like these aliens will have to go hungry, or find some less logical organisms to abduct.
Number 4.
Unobtainium is hard work. The rare mineral appears in only 1% of rocks in the mine. But your friend Tricky Joe has something up his sleeve. The unobtainium detector he's been perfecting for months is finally ready. The device never fails to detect unobtainium if any is present. Otherwise, it's still highly reliable, returning accurate readings 90% of the time. On his first day trying it out in the field, the device goes off, and Joe happily places the rock in his cart. As the 2 of you head back to camp where the ore can be examined, Joe makes you an offer. He'll sell you the ore for just $200. You know that a piece of unobtainium that size would easily be worth $1,000, but any other minerals would be effectively worthless. Should you make the trade?
3, 2, 1. Answer. Number 4.
It seems like a good deal. Since the detector is correct most of the time, shouldn't you be able to trust its reading? Unfortunately, no. Here's why. Imagine the mine has exactly 1,000 pieces of ore. An unobtainium rarity of 1% means that there are only 10 rocks with the precious mineral inside. All 10 would set off the detector. But what about the other 990 rocks without unobtainium? Well, 90% of them, 891 rocks to be exact, won't set off anything. But 10%, or 99 rocks, will set off the detector despite not having unobtainium, a result known as a false positive. Why does that matter? Because it means that all in all, 109 rocks will have triggered the detector. And Joe's rock could be any one of them, from the 10 that contain the mineral to the 99 that don't. Which means the chances of it containing unobtainium are 10 out of 109, about 9%. And paying $200 for a 9% chance of getting $1,000 isn't great odds. So why is this result so unexpected? And why did Joe's rock seem like such a sure bet? The key is something called the base rate fallacy. While we're focused on the relatively high accuracy of the detector, our intuition makes us forget to account for how rare the unobtainium was in the first place. But because the device's error rate of 10% is still higher than the mineral's overall occurrence, any time it goes off is still more likely to be a false positive than a real finding. This problem is an example of conditional probability. The answer lies neither in the overall chance of finding unobtainium nor the overall chance of receiving a false positive reading. This kind of background information that we're given before anything happens is known as unconditional or prior probability. What we're looking for, though, is the chance of finding unobtainium once we know that the device did return a positive reading. This is known as the conditional or posterior probability, determined once the possibilities have been narrowed down through observation. Many people are confused by the false positive paradox because we have a bias for focusing on specific information over the more general, especially when immediate decisions come into play. And while in many cases it's better to be safe than sorry, false positives can have real negative consequences. False positives in medical testing are preferable to false negatives, but they can still lead to stress or unnecessary treatment. And false positives in mass surveillance can cause innocent people to be wrongfully arrested, jailed, or worse. As for this case, the one thing you can be positive about is that Tricky Joe...
Number 5.
You're on the trail of a werewolf that's been terrorizing your town. After months of detective work, you've narrowed your suspects to one of 5 people: the mayor, the tailor, the baker, the grocer, or the carpenter. You've invited them to dinner with a simple plan. You'll slip a square of a rare werewolf antidote into each of their dinners. Unfortunately, your pet goat just ate 4 of the squares, and you only have 1 left. Luckily, the remaining square is 50 grams, and the minimum effective dose is 10 grams. If you can precisely divide the square into fifths, you'll have just enough antidote for everyone. You'll have to use a laser cutting tool to cut up the square. Every other means available to you isn't precise enough. There are 8 points that can act as starting or ending points for each cut. To use the device, you'll have to input pairs of points that tell the laser where to begin and end each cut, and then the laser executes all the cuts simultaneously. It's okay to cut the square into as many pieces as you want, as long as you can group them into 10-gram portions. But you can't fold the square or alter it otherwise, and you only get 1 shot at using the laser cutter. The full moon is rising, and in a moment someone will transform and tear you all apart, unless you can cure them first. How can you divide the antidote into perfect fifths, cure the secret werewolf, and save everyone?
3, 2, 1. Answer. Number 5.
To puzzles that involve cutting and rearranging, it's often helpful to actually take a piece of paper and try cutting it up to see what you can get. If we cut BF and DH, we'd get fourths, but we need fifths. Maybe there's a way to shave a bit off of a quarter to get exactly 1/5. Cutting BE looks good at first, but that last cut takes off a quarter of a quarter, leaving us with a portion of 3/16, just smaller than a fifth, and not enough to cure a werewolf. What if we started with BE instead? That would also give us a quarter, and is there a way to shave just a bit more off? Both DG and CH look promising. If we make one more cut from A to F, we may start to notice something. With these 4 cuts, from B to E, D to G, F to A, and H to C, we've got 4 triangles and a square in the middle. But the pieces that make each triangle can also be rearranged to make a square identical to the middle one. This means that we've split the antidote into perfect fifths. What's interesting about this sort of problem is that while it's possible to solve it by starting from the geometry, it's actually easier to start experimenting and see where that gets you. That wouldn't be as viable if the square had, say, 24 cut points, but with just 8, there are only so many reasonable options. You secretly dose each of the townspeople as the full moon emerges in the sky, and just as you do, a terrible transformation begins. Then, just as suddenly, it reverses. Your measurements were perfect, and the people and animals of the town can rest a little easier.
Number 6.
The greatest challenge a vampire hunter can take on is to bring sunlight into a vampire's lair. You've stealthily descended into the darkness of a vampire cave, setting a sequence of mirrors as you go. When the sun reaches the right angle in the sky, a focused beam of light will ricochet along the mirrors, strike your diffuser, and illuminate the great chamber where the vampires sleep. You set the final mirror and sneak through an opening in the corner of the great chamber. The diffuser must be wall-mounted, but the walls are crowded with coffins, which you don't dare disturb. The only open spots are in the other 3 corners of the room. The light will enter through the southwest corner at a 45-degree angle and bounce off the perfectly smooth metallic walls until it hits one of the other 3 corners. But which corner will it hit? You know the room is a rectangle, 49 meters wide and 78 meters long. You could probably find the answer by drawing a scale model of the room and tracing the path of the light, but the sun will be in its place in just minutes, and you've got no time to spare. Fortunately, there's a different way to solve this puzzle that's both simple and elegant. So, in which corner should you place the diffuser to flood the vampire lair with sunlight?
3, 2, 1. Answer. Number 6.
You could tackle this problem by examining smaller rooms, and you'd find a lot of interesting patterns. But there's one insight that can unravel this riddle in almost no time at all. Let's draw the chamber on a coordinate grid, with the southwest corner at the point 0, 0. The light passes through grid points with coordinates that are either both even or both odd. This is true even after it bounces off one or more walls. Another way of thinking about it is this. Since the light travels at a 45-degree angle, it always crosses the diagonal of a unit square. Traveling 1 meter horizontally changes the x-coordinate from even to odd, or vice versa. Traveling 1 meter vertically changes the y-coordinate from even to odd, or vice versa. Traveling diagonally, as the light does here, does both at once, so the x and y coordinates of any points the light passes through must be both even or both odd. This observation is more powerful than it seems. In particular, it means that we have a way to identify the kinds of points the light won't ever go through. If one of the coordinates is even and the other is odd, the light will miss them. That means it'll miss the top 2 corners of the room, since those points have one even and one odd coordinate. The southeast corner is the only option for the diffuser. And indeed, when that precious beam of sunlight enters the hall, it bounces between the walls and strikes the southeast corner spot on. The vampires, sensing the intrusion, burst from their coffins and turned to dust in the light. It was a high-stakes test, and you passed with flying colors.
Number 7.
Your rich, eccentric uncle just passed away, and you and your 99 nasty relatives have been invited to the reading of his will. He wanted to leave all of his money to you, but he knew that if he did, your relatives would pester you forever. So he is banking on the fact that he taught you everything you need to know about riddles. Your uncle left the following note in his will. I have created a puzzle. If all 100 of you answer it together, you will share the money evenly. However, if you are the first to find the pattern and solve the problem without going through all of the legwork, you will get the entire inheritance all to yourself. Good luck! The lawyer takes you and your 99 relatives to a secret room in the mansion that contains 100 lockers, each hiding a single word. He explains, every relative is assigned a number from 1 to 100. Heir 1 will open every locker. Heir 2 will then close every second locker. Heir 3 will change the status of every third locker. Specifically, if it's open, she'll close it, but if it's closed, she'll open it. This pattern will continue until all 100 of you have gone. The words in the lockers that remain open at the end will help you crack the code for the safe. Before Cousin Thaddeus can even start down the line, you step forward and tell the lawyer you know which lockers will remain open. But how?
3, 2, 1. Answer. Number 7.
The key is realizing that the number of times a locker is touched is the same as the number of factors in the locker number. For example, in locker number 6, person 1 will open it, person 2 will close it, person 3 will open it, and person 6 will close it. The numbers 1, 2, 3, and 6 are the factors of 6. So when a locker has an even number of factors, it'll remain closed, and when it has an odd number of factors, it'll remain open. Most of the lockers have an even number of factors, which makes sense because factors naturally pair up. In fact, the only lockers that have an odd number of factors are perfect squares, because those have one factor that when multiplied by itself equals the number. For locker 9, 1 will open it, 3 will close it, and 9 will open it. 3 times 3 equals 9, but the 3 can only be counted once. Therefore, every locker that is a perfect square will remain open. You know that these 10 lockers are the solution, so you open them immediately and read the words inside. The code is the first 5 lockers touched only twice. You realize that the only lockers touched twice have to be prime numbers, since each only has 2 factors, 1 and itself. So the code is 235711. The lawyer brings you to the safe, and you claim your inheritance. Too bad your relatives were always too busy being nasty to each other to pay attention to your eccentric uncle's riddles.
How many of this riddle puzzles did you solve? Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.